with working with bar teams and bartenders is that it's not the Abe show, right? It's not about me. I've met so many like quote unquote celebrity bartenders who are like maybe on Drink Masters and like submit their recipes to win awards, and their Instagram is all them just making cocktails and how wonderful their take on a Negroni is and how it's going to cure cancer. No one cares. But I think if you want to like put a bar together and bring a bar team together and create a cocktail menu, it should not be about you. It should be about your bar team first and foremost, and it should be about making people happy with what you've created. And if that doesn't, it sounds really like kumbaya, but I found it's really important to keep that as a compass. And success will follow if you keep that like objective. Day in and day out, like I want someone to sit in front of me or sit at a bar and just find some joy. And I think that's especially important these days, if that rings true with anybody. Okay, what else am I talking about here? I promise we're gonna taste some stuff and talk about these spirits too. So creating a cocktail menu or a cocktail bar, I think it's really important to find a point of view, right? A perspective. I think there's a lot of shticks out there. There's a lot of trends that come and go, but how do you find your voice in a beverage program? I think it takes time. I think is the short answer. I think you need to learn how to make a classic 10,000 different ways, and then you start to change one thing. Maybe my Negroni doesn't need Campari every time. I can use Aperol in a Negroni. Maybe a paper plane, if we're riding on Campari and Aperol, maybe a paper plane is better with Campari, or more for me. Maybe that's interesting. Maybe Nonino is not the move, but maybe I want to change that to Montenegro. But using like the templates and learning the classic cocktails and then changing one thing. And I think you begin to grow a palette and you begin to create a voice and a perspective of what you like. Because I think just thinking about, if you just look at all the imbibe articles and all the trends and what's happening and excuse my French, the goddamn espresso martini and the dirty martini, like trends come and go. You don't need to build a beverage program on a teeny menu. This is 1995. We can learn how to make all the cocktails very well and start to experiment with them and start to change ingredients. Okay, so branch out. So you learn about so many schools of bartenders. Back in the day when this renaissance of cocktail bars happened, there was very much the East Coast and the West Coast way of doing things. The East Coast way in the United States was very much pre-prohibition style, making cocktails. The West Coast was very much like farm to table when it came to cocktails, like fresh herbs and ingredients. And those are very different, and they both talk shit about each other. I'm sorry I curse a lot, I'm in Chicago, I don't know. But that now, because of the internet and because of globalization and those wonderful things, and just cocktail bars are everywhere now, that divide has been blurred a little bit, and you can have everything in between at any local restaurant and cocktail bar. And that's also important that cocktails now are everywhere. They're expected. You go to any restaurants, it's not just wine and food and maybe some beer options. You almost absolutely have to have cocktails. And I think that is wonderful. There's so much in terms of style. There's so much in terms of technique. Where am I going with this? I think bartenders and beverage directors think that their way is the best. And I think chefs are like this too, from my experience. And their technique, their way of doing things is absolutely the way. But I think always engaging the humility side of what we're doing and trying to learn. For instance, like throwing cocktails, if you're familiar, they're shaking and they're stirring, those are the classic ways, but throwing is that whole thing where you do the dramatic thing and you go. My first time going to Europe and I would see bartenders doing that, I rolled my eyes so hard. I was like, what is this? This ticket is taking so long. Is this drink gonna be, just stir the drink, like what's going on? But I have a bartender on a part of our team who worked throughout Europe, And we did a side-by-side. I was like, can you teach me like really what is the technique here? What is it really doing and outside of the show? And I learned something. And I think that is really essential to always creating a better bar program. And that leads into my next point is be collaborative. I think that a bartender who just like emails recipes to everybody or has them printed out on a laminated sheet behind a bar and saying this is the way and I made these drinks and I'm a genius is stupid. I think that a better way of creating a bar team and people who are more invested in what you're trying to do is to bring people in. So at Meadowlark, all our bartenders add drinks to the menu. It's a part of our season, our changes. We've only been open for a year, but everyone must put a drink on the menu. So that they get a prompt, I write like a letter, there's a picture, there's an explanation, I give them some prompts. You gotta do citrusy, vegetal. One was you have to make this taste like the Atlantic Ocean, and like these creative things, they come meet with me, they workshop together, and then we present the drinks together. And it's such a learning moment, it's such a collaborative moment, and people are more invested in the bar program and are more excited to sell the drinks, more excited to be a part of what you're doing. So I really believe in that. And those are the things I wanted to talk about in terms of bar program. People coming together from around the world to talk about spirits and cocktails is very important. Clearly we're here, right? We're doing things like this. And if you're not familiar with the 50 Best, it's this worldwide convention that talks about best bar programs, and it's really global now, and it's very much about including people from around the world. And now that we have regional, North America, Asia, Europe, and Central and South America, and it's great. Chicago, some have been saying, it just happened, I think 2 days ago. They just released all the award winners, and only one Chicago bar was in the top 100, which was quite sad for Kumiko, which is a wonderful bar program. It really is wonderful. It is truly an amazing experience there. But I think that gets back to my first point, is that end of the day, what keeps you going and keeps you happy is making your staff and your bar team really excited, and also getting them and yourself excited about making people happy. Because awards come and go. It's great. It's great to be acknowledged, but it's not the point. We're just taking things that are usually poison and making them taste good, and making people happy. I mean, that's what we're about. And if you're about the list or the accolades, you're not going to be happy doing this for long, I think. And I think those things will come, and if they don't, it's okay. Life is great. First up is Ritual Zero Proof Aperitif Alternative. This won double gold medal, 98 points. Okay? So I want everyone, to taste, you smell. I like to smell, bring it down, bring it up again, smell again, sip a little, let it coat your mouth. I swallowed, but then, so I could talk, but then you let it coat your mouth and rest, and then you swallow. And then take a moment, let it rest, think about it. Think about childhood or what you were doing before this, or wherever your brain wandered while I was rambling on, and then come back to it again and smell. So, this product is wonderful. I think that the fact that it is non-alcoholic is, in a way, it's a very important, it's a part of Ritual and what they wonderfully do, but is negligible in terms of flavor and taste. Because this to me is exactly what I'm looking for in terms of an aperitif. It's bright, it's citrusy, it has body, it has structure. It typically is there when there's alcohol, but it also ends with a super nice long finish. It's still there, it's not going away. It does not have commitment issues. It is definitely there. And that's important not just for an application as an aperitif, but in terms of its impact on a cocktail, right? I think subtlety sometimes is not a friend when it comes to something big and bold, like a digestivo or an aperitivo or aperitif. And this to me has wide implications, whether it be a low or no ABV drink or not, which I think is wonderful. I know it's hard to hear, but does anyone have any tasting notes or anything they want to say about this? What's great about their products too is that I don't work for them, by the way, or any of these brands, but it's low in calories. And I think that is important for a lot of people. It's also no ABV, which is now a necessity in cocktail menus and cocktail programs. And may I say, not just a necessity, but not like an afterthought. I think a lot of times people think that NA drinks need to be like a small section under like wine and beer for a cocktail place, and then there's like Coke and Diet Coke, and then there's NA drinks on like the back with some like, I think that should be really a part of the cocktail program. Low, no ABV, I think is important for a lot of people who are drinking alcohol, have varied relationships with alcohol, and so on and so forth. We all know this, but finding good NA spirits is kind of tough sometimes. I'm not broadly talking shit about anything, but I think this is phenomenal, and I think would be great in so many applications. So the question is, who is the best target audience in terms of guests coming into bars? I think I've been surprised. Sometimes there's like a group of clearly, well, I'm assuming moms and dads who have grown-up kids. They come in and like half of them are really knowledgeable about cocktails, and a lot of them want NA drinks. And then you have people who are obviously pregnant, some people who are doing a month off. But a lot of times I think people just don't want to be outed for whatever reason that they want to have an NA drink. I don't think people, as somebody who's talked to tables and touched tables, they want to be like, I want the NA old fashioned. They just want to have a cocktail and not feel like they're judged in the service or the exchange or by the group. They're just like, oh, I picked a drink that happens to be NA. And I think that has changed since before COVID and maybe even years before that, where I would be a service well bartender and someone would come up and say, like, please don't tell anybody I'm pregnant. Can you make this drink look like it? But it's, I think now it's broad, and I've been surprised. Oh, thank you. This is a bottle, by the way. Wonderful product. Their lineup is great too. So Wisher vodka. This is what the bottle looks like. Before we talk about this brand and vodka and its implications in cocktails or its utilization, do the same thing: smell, sip, taste. It's lovely. Okay, so I'm going to be real with you, and I think a lot of bartenders who come up in cocktail bartending think this way, or at least I did for a while. Vodka as a category was explained to me as something that, the category itself is something that is unspectacular, is like the language a lot of people use, and has to be made from something that was alive at one point. And that's essentially vodka, right? Something that doesn't taste, smell, or look like much of anything, but is alcohol. Now this Wisher vodka is not that, but that was what was explained to me when I was training in cocktail bars. Because at the time, like, people were really trying to move away from vodka martinis or vodka Red Bulls or whatever you were just putting vodka in to give you the buzz that you needed. Vodka for cocktail bartenders or bar programs, a lot of people have the misconception that it equals no flavor. And I think that's not true. I think that vodka, what I've learned, is gives so much subtlety and so much structure to a drink in ways that maybe aren't so prevalent as what we've just tasted. Because The ritual was so bold, said hello, it's not shy, there's no like song and dance, it's there. This is different, right? There's some high notes, there's some citrus for sure, there's a lot of structure, there's a weird, it was explained to me and I totally get that, the marshmallowy pillowness to the mouthfeel, and it also stays with you. And it's got great structure, it's got some perceived viscosity too, and I think the applications are great. And I think vodka adds element to cocktails that, building a cocktail was once explained to me, this makes a lot of sense, kind of like if you think of an orchestra, right? There's the high notes, the violins, the piccolos, and then you have like the cellos and then the violas, and then you got the bassoons and the baritones. This just makes sense. I mean, and the things on either side, and it's panned, and it's high, and it's low. And to me, things like vodka give some of that middle in terms of mouthfeel and ABV, which is important, but also has a lot of those high notes and a lot of those panned high notes. So whether it be subtle or not, gives so much to a nuance of a cocktail where everything is subtle, or you just want to highlight things that may not be at the forefront, but would be great in terms of a cocktail. So this, in terms of applications at a bar, to speak of flavor and the accolades this has gotten is wonderful. It's woman-owned, it's made from beets. It is, correct me if I'm wrong back there too, it is available right now just in Florida, one state of Florida and Maryland, but soon to be in Illinois. So gluten-free and vegan. And I think woman-owned is important. And I think those are not just like sticky like selling points to like say ooh la la. I think that's important. And I think people really care about that. And I think as purchasers and people who develop bar programs, doing things to support women producers is huge. And people of color in production is huge because there's so many people who look like me who are in this world who automatically are grandfathered into getting all the support. I think we actively need to continue to support people who are not showcased enough. And I think this does that wonderfully. And I think it's a lot of applications, not just in a shaken cocktail, a Vesper, a Gibson, I think would have so many applications on a bar program. And a lot of people want to have very tasty experiences with cocktails at a cocktail bar. They'll have two, and then they're like, you know what? I'm still here to party. I'm a little palate busted. Can I have something really subtle? And I think something like this with some really like wonderfully blanc vermouth is wonderful. And like a 50-50 vodka martini, delicious. El Perro Grande tequila from El Paso. Look at this, come on. This is amazing. This is a Chihuahua, I think. What a face. So let's before we talk about this in terms of flavor, but also bottling, which I think is important. Let's smell, taste. So off the nose is great. I mean, it's like wet clay, like right when you dug into the earth. It's got a creaminess on the finish. You get some grassy notes and a little bit of peppery notes, like pink peppercorn is there on the tail end, but this, I would say, is a wonderful sip on, think about life and your life decisions tequila. On its own, but also, of course, in a cocktail. Now talking about a bottle like this is obviously not a bottle you're gonna put in your rail, right? It won't fit, and this needs to be seen. And I think things like this are important for spirits that taste good. I think a lot of times people look at a bottle like this and think it's maybe a gimmick, but I think it's a lot of fun when the spirit is good, first of all, but two, it has a tie-in to what they're all about. So this tequila producer donates proceeds of all the tequila sales to humanitarian efforts for dog rescue. And so that's why our little friend is here in front of us. So this is something that I think would be great. The whole lineup, all the SKUs are really tasty, and having this as like a flight behind your bar, which I think a lot of people love. I think that programming is wonderful on a bar program, or on a luxury Oaxacan old fashioned or margarita, something like that. So Heaven Hill is a wonderful producer of not just whiskey, but their whole umbrella produces so many wonderful spirits that I've used that are tried and true. That some of my favorite things on earth are Heaven Hill products. And specifically the Heaven Hill Bottle and Bond. Back in the day, it's something you could, I remember it was you could only get it in Louisville, Kentucky. And so we would drive down, like the bar team on days off, go to Kentucky, go to the dustiest corner liquor store, and then one of the guys who trained me, one of my mentors, was like, gotta get on your stomach, you gotta go look in the back and grab the bottles. And typically it was a whole line of a square bottle with a white label that was Heaven Hill Bottled and Bond 6 year. And it was like $11 for that bottle. And no one thought much of it. It was when American whiskey was really on the rise. I heard a statistic that like in 2007, there were only 16 American whiskey producers. And by 2020, there is something like 1,500 and growing with new producers, and one in every single US state. So when people noticed that there was good booze that was affordable, that was delicious, it really drove up demand that production cannot keep up with. So another expression of this is, not to talk about other brands, but Old Fitzgerald Bottled and Bond, wonderful expression. It was a very affordable wheated bonded bourbon that went away because they could not keep up with Bartenders Got Wind that this stuff was really good. So I was super glad that, I think this was gone in 2016 or 17, something around there. They took away the 6th year, and then they brought this back in 2018, 2019. And this is by far one of my favorite things when life is tough and you just need some good whiskey to sip on. This is Whiskey of the Year, double gold medal, 97 points. I mean, deserves everything. 1897, the Bottled and Bond Act was the first actually government regulated food or beverage thing ever. And it ensured a couple things, because what people were doing is whiskey really exploded, especially post-Civil War. And there's a lot of entrepreneurs who are taking a lot of cuts to make money, as entrepreneurs and business owners sometimes do. And so the only way you could get some whiskey is you go to like Joe's bar, and Joe had a barrel of bourbon that they sent over, and you sometimes brought like a spent milk jug, or they had some glassware, or sometimes just a shot, and you'd get their whiskey, and they'd fill it up from the barrel itself, and you take it home or you enjoy it there. What they were doing is that they were watering it down, they were putting tobacco, strychnine, and turpentine in there. There are accounts of people going partially blind and partial facial paralysis, and it's a whole thing that was not great for whiskey. So a couple lobbyists who are whiskey producers started a lobby for the Bottled and Bond Act. Colonel E.H. Taylor is famously one of them. In 1897, that became a thing and ensured a couple things. It has to be 100 proof, has to be in a government-regulated warehouse, has to be from one distillation season, and has to be 100 proof. And I think that is something that is really encouraged, and that's something great to implement, not just for higher mark whiskeys, but whiskeys that are also great for the rail are the bonded spirits and the bonded whiskeys. It's not just whiskey itself. Bottled and Bond can be applied to brandies. There's apple brandy, Sacred Run, all Heaven Hill products. But this, in terms of application in the bar program, I would definitely feature this this is something that I wouldn't necessarily want to make like a buck or a mule out of, or something that I want to add something that would really mask the nuance of. I would definitely put it in a sip kind of drink, so maybe a luxury old fashioned with zhuzhed up Demerara syrup and maybe an extra bitters to give it some complexity, but let the spirit do the talking itself. And I think that's far and wide what infusions and syrups and things of that nature are very popular, and they look great, but at the end of the day, the spirits need to do the talking in a cocktail. And I think that especially something like this really showcases that. Next is our aged Tarny Port, aged 10 years. Port is fortified wine from northern Portugal. Smell, taste. So, port, this is like big raisin explosion on the middle palate, some spice, citrus up front, this big, bold, round. reminds us of vermouth. It's got some sherry vibes too, some nuttiness is there as well. But this is, of course, meant to be used typically as kind of like a digestivo, but used all day long, right? It's a sip-on. Room temperature, actually, a lot of people tell me in Portugal they don't keep it cold. We're like pretty adamant here in the States that anything fortified we put in the fridge. I get it, but they drink it room temperature. Cold is different. You'll notice different things. Obviously, we all know this, but this on its own is wonderful. It's great to have on a cocktail menu or a cocktail program or a restaurant, a digestif or a dessert wine section. I think that really is nice for people who want to slow down and have a different moment other than cocktails. But this, I've used this product in cocktails. I had a drink that was called For Good Measure, because my mom used to drink red wine while making spaghetti. And then as a kid, I was like, Mom, why are you drinking red wine with the spaghetti? And it's like, oh, it's a little bit for me and a little bit for good measure. And she put it in the spaghetti sauce, and it was the whole thing. I don't know why I told that story, but I named the drink after my mom, and the drink had sweet Italian vermouth, and it had this as the base spirit. And that was the star of the show. It wasn't something higher ABV, and then I had a red wine syrup, some muddled oranges, and some lemon juice. And it was an ode to my mother, who she deserved that glass of wine. But I think that this is something that, kind of like ritual we were talking about, is something that I think things like ports and vermouths and genepies and things that are looked at as things to just add flavor left and right of a cocktail, they can be like the protein, right? They can be like the star of the show. They can be the main highlight of the dish. And I think that this is exactly that. I think an inverted Manhattan, this with like an ounce of Heaven Hill next to it, 2 ounces of the port, delicious, you know? Add a couple bitters in there, forget about it. I think my point is that really embrace the fortifieds and the liqueurs as something that to be highlighted as the star of the show in a cocktail. Because I think it, one, is super flavorful, like this is packed with flavor, but two, it's not something that you need to do much to. You can add citrus, a little bit of acid, a little bit of fat, and it does a lot of the pulling for you. So the question is there certain styles of drinks or are there certain spirits or trends that guests are asking for when they're coming into cocktail bars? Yes, I think people are asking a lot about espresso martinis, but people are asking for those trendy drinks. People always ask about egg white. I think a lot of times if there's an egg white drink on the list, people don't care what's in it. There's like, ooh, egg white. I've not heard about that. That's cool. But trends have changed. I think back when I was, making a lot of drinks, the trend was it's the old-fashioned, whatever vodka drink you had on the menu, and then the agave shaken drink. And those were the stars. Always the top three, usually old-fashioned vodka and then agave shaken. Those were the three. Nowadays, it's like egg white, mezcal, and gin are like, and then NA is rising as well. So yeah, I think also people drink with their eyes quite a bit. We're very visual, and sometimes when a pretty drink walks from the service well, people are like, ooh, what's that one? I want that one. Because I think people are overwhelmed. And I think a lot of times bartenders and bar programs are the gatekeepers to explain a lot, but it's overwhelming. Like we know all about these spirits and the nuances of them, but when guests come in, they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Does it taste good? So I think it's difficult because so many times when I was a young bartender, I was like, let me tell you about this drink and what the story is. And my mother and her glass of wine is like, please, okay. Does it taste good? Is it what I'm looking for? So I think when it comes to that, and on that note, I think most of the time my wife has a lot of trouble picking food to order. I think we probably experienced this, but she wants me to pick and she wants her to say no to everything. Do you want Thai food? No. Okay, do you want tacos? We did that last week. What do you want? Do you want me to make something? No, you don't have to do that. So you want to order. Okay, so I've got to do some Sherlock Holmes to figure out what the heck she wants and make sure that she's happy, right? Very important. And I think that's like bartending and creating a cocktail menu, presenting it in a way that people can either know a lot and nerd out about some cocktails that are like, ooh, that's really cool. You did that fat wash, or you did that infusion, or that combo of spirits is really cool. Or something presents and reads on paper as, oh, I know I want that. I know that's got vodka in it, it's got hibiscus and watermelon and mint and lime juice. Yes, that's for me. But when they taste it, they're surprised. You present something that's very accessible, but you put your voice and your perspective to it. It's like, oh, I'm gonna sub out, to go back to the beginning thing, sub out something to create a little hint of surprise. And I think that's really refreshing and what excites people. I think sometimes spirits producers, don't want you to infuse into their spirits because they've spent a lot of time making that taste good, but that's okay, you can do it. I think infusions are wonderful and I think important in terms of adding ingredients to drinks, and I think need to be explored more and more. I think a lot of times what I find recently is that berries and fruit and things that are a little bit more fragile, taking frozen, like fruit, like frozen strawberries, and putting it in, say, vodka or gin, letting it sit, and letting it go to refrigeration temperature, that water from the fruit is going to infuse, but then the higher level of vodka is going to pull, or gin, pull the flavor from the fruit, and then you can just strain it off. You don't have to blend it, worry about seeds, worry about the fragility of it, but you grab a lot of the mid and high notes from the fruit and bring it into a spirit, where you don't have to create a syrup that is pretty fragile and another thing in the well, but you can actually just infuse the spirit with it. So I think it's something to absolutely explore. I think sage, mint, fennel, the garden stuff, great to add into infusions as well. I think the higher the proof, if it's wine-based, there's a lot of variables, but yeah, use it, do it, it's great. A big thing for me is that when you create a bar program, a cocktail list, or a cocktail, the guy who trained me, Toby Maloney, he always talked about this. He pounded a lot of things into our heads, but one of the things he pounded was that everything should tell a story, right? It should not just be, here's this, I'm a master of creating this Black Manhattan, I'm amazing. No, what story is that telling? And I think that that's important when crafting every cocktail. What's the beginning, what's the middle, and what's the end? What's the journey and the story you want to tell? But also doing that with a cocktail list and a cocktail program. What is the story I'm telling here? And I think that also, thinking about that helps you solidify a voice when putting a cocktail list together. Am I Mediterranean flavor driven? Cool. Not as a shtick, but that happened to happen, and that's kind of where I'm coming from. Or I really am enjoying highballs and sparkling cocktails, or following that trend and what story I want to tell, rather than like what's cool and trendy and how do I infuse that into. That's just, to me, very muddled. Whereas telling a good story is important, and I think receiving feedback when you're putting drinks together and getting people's advice. I studied creative writing. I was abused in workshops where people are like, you should just give up. You're not good at writing poems. No one knows what you're talking about. And I was not good. And I went home and I cried a little bit and I figured out, you know what? They're right. And I can tell the story better. And I think that that's always important. Again, we're not, because I didn't get on a list or because I didn't get an award doesn't mean anything. Like, I'm excited about telling a good story and making people happy.